it's enlivening because it's so primary, right? And
Yeah.
that's that original energy, that energy of origin of source, right? It's like source energy.
Welcome to Biodynamic Conversations, celebrating 100 years of biodynamics. And as we explore elemental alchemy and have a deeper understanding of the elements of fire, earth, air, and water, and how they all connect and what they mean.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Beautiful. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity, and um for the gratitude. Wow, that really hit me. It's interesting, when Leslie was introducing you, she said how you were great at everything, but the one thing I heard missing is she didn't say cosmos. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, that's me. I got that covered. Because I'm the star man. So between the two of us, we covered everything. Um and yeah, um the elements, especially, as cosmic energies, they are unique in the sense that they actually predate astrology as we know it. So as an astrologer, the elements are beyond fundamental. They are like formative, if you will. They are the stuff. They're like the primary colors on the color wheel. There's only three of them, but from those three, thousands and millions of things can be created.
Mm.
As publishers, I'm sure you can you can jive with that, right? All the different color combinations that we can play around with and stuff. And so these four elements, to me, they are so cosmic and so universal and so profoundly alive in our experience. When you talked about having dirt under your fingernails, I mean, the earth, as an element, as a being, really, Gaia and whatnot. um it's such a rich thing to just remember. I got the member letter, newsletter thing from the Josephine Porter Institute, one of our partners with the calendar work that we do, recently. And they were talking about going through the calendar and just honoring the energy of the moon each day, and like, just that, like, just honoring each of these elements as the moon passes through them, and paying attention to the power and the ubiquity of their presence in our lives. The air that we breathe. um there's a song about that. Sometimes all I need is the air that I breathe. you know but sometimes we need to have our feet on the earth too. um Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to be talking about the elements, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. And they really, they go back to the foundation of our civilization. And so it's like, one of the things that struck me recently is like, in terms of culture, we can have like, each generation sort of has a mandate or a responsibility to reinterpret their culture on their terms. And I get that, and that's beautiful. And I love to see the new ones coming up and doing their thing with it. But at the same time, like, if if we get copies of copies of copies of copies, eventually, like, that's what aging is. Actually, it's like our cells are copies of copies. They're not, and so if we can get back to the original impetus of who we are and where we come from, that's really very enlivening. And so that's what I think the power of the elements is.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, Gary is the astronomer and astrologist who helps us put together the celestial planting calendar. So that is and we're in their 10th year of publication, and he works very closely with us, and we're actually in the middle of doing 2025 calendar right now. So if you also have calendar questions, then we'll save those to the end, but we're going to focus on the elemental alchemy for the bulk of this conversation. So Gary, I love how you presenced how foundational the elements are. And I'm just curious, like if you were to summarize what elemental alchemy is in one sentence, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting because I had the good fortune of hanging out with some really wise people lately, and in particular Stuart Lundy. He was talking about biodynamics as like that the goal of biodynamics is to renew the hunger for spiritual energy, if you will. And so I would say that it's that elemental alchemy is about renewing our hunger for cosmic energy, if you will. And that's yeah, and that's the beauty of it, is that it,
Mm,
it enlivens us. It enlivens. I can feel it as we're talking, right? In my, you know, it's enlivening because it's so primary, right? And
yeah.
that's that original energy, that energy of origin of um of source, right? It's like source energy. It's really vitalizing. And
Mhm.
so it helps us to renew that hunger for that cosmic energy. Um, that, as I think one of the most fascinating things for me about biodynamic agriculture is that it is unique in all of agriculture in that it seeks to nourish plants and therefore humans with not just the material, nourishment of the earth and the air, and right, but cosmic nourishment as well, which is the unique take, you know.
Man, I just love that. And I'm just going to interject here, Gary, because gosh, it was a long time ago, like in 1990, 91, I started to study polarity therapy, which is all energy
Mm,
based, and its roots are in Ayurvedic, Chinese, ancient Hermetic sciences, and it's taken all the most effective principles from all these different disciplines into one model, and it mirrors biodynamics so powerfully.
mm,
But one of the things that we studied was how all the foods fall under different elements like the air, fire, water, and earth. And what was so profound to me was how most of the practitioners in my trainings, even beyond polarity therapy, but in different energy medicine, it the food was just so overlooked, and I always kept bringing people back to food. I'm like, but the food and how it's grown, and like it's such a fundamental part of our life, and the way we grow it and our relationship with it, the soil that it comes from, is so powerful. And I love how you really amplified that is, I say, one of the like the flagship pieces of
yeah,
biodynamics, and it's more than just the protein and the carbohydrates and the sugars. It's the
minerals,
actual vitality that we're getting from our food.
cosmic energy, yes, because
Yeah,
we're on this beautiful blue marble floating around in space, right?
yeah.
Being constantly immersed in cosmic energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
So
we are. That's who we are.
yeah, yeah. Let's dive into, what do you think about this if we dive into each of the elements, the air, fire, water, and earth, and talked about what their qualities are, what they
Sure,
amplify, and the different plants that are
sure.
related to the
Do you want to stop?
elements.
Do you want to start top, bottom, or middle?
Where would you like to start? That's where we'll start.
Oh, let's see. Well, hmm. Let's start top. Let's
Okay.
start at the top. So, of the elements, the least dense of the four elements is fire. So the symbol for fire is an upward pointing triangle, because fire seeks the limits of fire will move from the center outward. It radiates, heat radiates, right? So there's this quality of and what is fire, but it's actually the breaking of molecules to release energy. So there's this movement, there's this dynamic, outward radiating energy that and you know, I just got back from Gaia recently where we were working with valerian blossoms, and you know that's one of the purposes of the valerian you know, prep is to activate the heat in the soil, right? And so, you know, I was talking to Stuart on the way back where I was like, hey, can I just put some of this stuff in the bottom of my compost pile? Like, do I have to stuff it in the thing and can I just put some in the bottom of my, he's like, yeah, just put it in the bottom so it can radiate through the whole pile, you know? So there's this quality of fire that is radiating, and obviously, you know, it's like that's something that we feel when we sit by a fire. You know, we feel that the heat radiating, and it has the quality of movement of it has the quality of being able to overcome obstacles, right? Fire will jump across barriers. That's why it's very difficult to fight fires when they become out of control, because it can leap across barriers. So fire is very dynamic, and and it's sort of like the it rules over the upper parts of the plants for that reason, because it's the least dense of the elements. Well, in terms of the plants, we have the root, we have the leaf, we have the flower, and then we have the fruit. And so the fire element is related to the fruit. So for winemakers, for instance, biodynamics is really big in the wine community, actually, as I understand it. And they're pretty hardcore from what I hear. Like they will not pop a bottle of wine unless you got the moon in a fire sign or a fire constellation, excuse me. Um, and because of that vitality that comes with the fire. So that's sort of the quick 20-second, a little more than 20 seconds, probably rundown on fire.
Yeah, and then the signs that are connected to the fire
Right.
element.
So the fire trigon, there's 12 constellations, right? And there's 4 elements, so that means there's 3 of each. So we call them trigons because there's 3. So we have Aries, we have Leo, and we have Sagittarius. So Aries is cardinal. You can think about it like Aries is like that spark that gets the fire started. It's like cardinal fire. It's like beginnings. It's like the beginning of the zodiac. So it's like this spark. And then with Leo, it's fixed fire. So Leo is like when you actually get the sticks piled around and you start getting a nice warm radiating fire. And then Sagittarius is mutable fire, so it's like spreading the fire. So, you know, the archer sticks the arrow and then and sends the fire across the valley to another place or whatever. So there's kind of 3 different energetic ways of expressing fire there. So we have Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And the interesting thing about Sagittarius is that you know, it's the sign that is the where the moon, you know, shifts from being in its declination, right, from being at the bottom, and then shifts moving back up. So it's near the solstice. So one of the things that you'll notice in the calendar is when you're following the planting row on the transplanting row, you'll always notice that those shifts where the moon shifts from going down and then back up, it's at the Sagittarius. So literally, Sagittarius is shooting the moon back up across the sky, which is pretty interesting, you know. It's like
Mhm.
very symbolic.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm just going to get Leslie to bring up the calendar for us so we can, I think she's already doing that, so we can
Okay.
look at it too as we're relating to everything. And if you have your celestial planting calendar close to you, you can actually look at it as we're going through this. Um, and what specific crops are connected and related to the fire element?
So your fruit crops, so you know, your stone fruits, you know, Right now I have my peaches are starting to get, you know, looking pretty attractive, and I'm trying to keep the deer from nibbling on them. The deer like to nibble on the leaves for whatever reason. I guess peach leaves taste really good. Um, but yeah, but also berries, like my raspberries are starting to come in. Um, uh, when we think about fruits, some of the less obvious ones, like tomato, is a fruit, right? It's not necessarily a vegetable. It's a fruit in that it comes from a blossom and then the blossom fruits out, right? Um, so anything, I think even beans technically are classified in the fruit category, right? Even though they're like legumes in if you were sowing beans, you'd be sowing them on a fire day, basically.
Yeah, beans and peas,
Right.
squash, cucumbers. Yeah,
Yeah.
and cereal crops too. Cereal crops are also on,
Grain.
yeah,
Yeah.
on fire days.
It's a fruit in the sense that it is it's this kernel of um goodness that sits at the top of the plant, right? It's like there we see on June 21st, the moon switches as she enters the sign of Sagittarius. There we can see in the next column, she switches to ascending back through the zodiac again. So she reaches the bottom of what's called declination, which is basically the bottom of the relationship with the equator, and then she begins ascending back up through. And so I just think that's one of the cool things about Sagittarius. Like it's literally the one that shoots the moon back up through the zodiac.
Yeah, and I love I love the sign of Sagittarius. My daughter is a Sagittarius, and um I think of it as the earthy fire element. Even though it's not earth, it's just so to me it's so connected to earth, and
Mm,
the fact that it is part of that transition really makes a lot of sense to me. With
mm.
I just want to touch base on if you can bring the calendar back up again, please, Leslie. Um, so in the calendar you can see each of the elements are connected to a different color. So the fire element, which we're speaking to right now, is connected to the the red color. And then you can see at the bottom of the pages, we have the elemental chart, which helps give a more clear picture of what the elements are connected to. So the color, the element, the plants that they're
Weather
connected to, and then the zodiac signs, and then also the weather and the plant function, the quality of the plant. So we're talking about fire being the
vitality.
vitality. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
heat. Yeah, it's interesting, we've had a relatively cool spring here where I'm at. I don't know about you, but this week it's supposed to get like it's going to be like the hottest temperatures we've had. So it's interesting how there's some heat coming in. I haven't really looked exactly um but that's one of the funnest parts of what I do is because I mean Maria, it's pretty explicitly stated in her books that not only was experimentation done on the plants themselves, as in like they were sown at different times, right, with the moon in the different constellations, but she was also doing concurrent weather observations at the same time. Um, and yeah, it's remarkable how how the weather shifts can be so dramatic when we get these shifts between the elements, you know.
Mhm, mhm.
Oftentimes it's really very interesting.
Yeah. And how about you want to move right down? Do you want to move into the earth element or
You know
Sure,
what?
we can.
I just want to clarify. Gary had mentioned the research. That's Maria Thun,
Yes, Maria
Thun,
Thun.
Maria
Sorry,
Thun.
thank
Thun.
you.
Yeah. um I'm specifically referring to her books Biodynamic Year and what else? There's Gardening for Life, and there's the Biodynamic Year, the Biodynamic Way. Um, so yeah, there's definitely some interesting correlations with the weather, and that's actually where the forecasts that we have on the top pages. The forecasts come from basically, I'm looking in this table down here and I'm looking at like, oh, wow, look, we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different planets in six, actually, at the beginning of the month. There are 6 planets in Earth signs. Well, now Earth is the opposite. Earth is the densest of the 4 elements, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, any child knows that if you throw a rock into water, no matter how artfully you skip it, it's going to sink. And so, being that dense, that cool weather usually follows with the Earth signs. And I mean, we had like about 10 degrees cooler than average earlier this month here. And we've reached the middle of the month, and like Mars just recently went into a fire sign, and now things are starting to heat up. Now we're getting some hot weather. Um, so that's these elements are part very much a part of where those forecasts come from. Just so if you want to follow along, that's what I'm looking at. And I try to be explicit about like that. Like I'll literally say, expect moisture, particularly when the moon is in front of a water constellation on these dates or whatever. Um, and so you can follow along with that and kind of get a feeling for um, now hopefully it's interesting because I heard people actually getting into an argument about this. They were like, well, we should do it on this weekend, and they're like, no, 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 Gary says it's going to rain that weekend. I was like, oh, no, no, please don't let that. It's a forecast, right? I'm not saying it's absolutely going to rain, but that's kind of what the elements are telling us. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, so if we want to talk about Earth being like this dense, the most material of the 4 elements, really, because fire is hardly even material in the sense that you can't grasp it, you
Mhm.
know. But Earth, yeah, you get it stuck in your fingernails, right? You get it stuck between your toes. You can cake it all over you if you want to. Um, it's that really good, dense, smelly stuff that we like to. And what's interesting is that that's essentially what farming is alchemy. You see, we're taking plant material and we're turning it into dirt. And then we're taking dirt and turning it into plants. So the plants are literally going from dirt, reaching up into the sky, becoming leaf, becoming flower, becoming fruit, and then turning back into dirt. So there's this cycle, this like Ouroboros of, and so for me to say that farming is alchemy is like, it's not even esoteric. It's like so obviously true. And
Mhm.
that's the thing that I think Steiner got. And that's the thing, that's the beautiful magic of biodynamics, is that essentially these biodynamic preps then become a way, like the manure prep, for instance. Manure is like almost dirt. It's just like one step removed, like, right? Because the cows basically, it's pre-digested, right? So they take the plant material that we're trying to turn into dirt and they digest it for us. And so it's one step closer to dirt than it was if we didn't have the manure, right? And so that manure prep, that's like the earthy cosmic forces. And so there's this dichotomy between like the earth and the water element and the fire and the air element, between this cosmic, these upward radiating forces, these cosmic forces that Steiner talked about, and these earthy, inward moving, right? The symbol for earth is a downward pointing, right? It seeks the center, it seeks stability, it seeks, right? So um that's the beauty of the earth element, is that. And the other thing that I think is really fascinating about the earth element is that um it's so multifaceted, right? There's so many minerals in the soil. There's so many different kinds of stone. There's so many, and each farm is different. The pH is going to be different. The mineral content is going to be different, right? And so there's this what seems like boring and like it's just plain dirt, right? It's like it's so complex and it's so there's so much variety going on there. And typically I find that earth people are similar. They seem to be like really calm, cool, collected, really practical people, not fancy, don't seek to be the object of attention, but when you start talking to them, they're good at this, they're good at that, they're good at the what aren't you good at is that's what I love about earth people. Yeah. They're
Mhm.
usually really
Yeah,
multi-talented.
so true. And what about what does the earth element evoke for when we're planting seeds and when we're planting our crops?
Right.
When
So the
we're-
earth element relates to the root part of the crop, right? And so that's what that part of the plant that lives underground, you know, and that's the so when we plant a seed and we cover it with soil, that's the first part of the plant that gets activated and spreads, you know, down into the soil. So that part of the plant that's interacting with all the mycelia, with all the minerals, and that's literally serves to draw upwards the life force from the soil and direct it up and out into the cosmic part of the plant.
Mhm.
So it's the foundation of everything, really.
And then one of the things I learned along the way is that Earth days are are one of the best days to plant absolutely any crop, because if you are you missing the fruit days and the fire days and the air days and you have something to plant and it's Earth Day, they say just plant everything. What's your experience with that, Gary?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even with fruit trees, for instance, right? We don't plant fruit trees from seed. We graft them onto a really good root base, right? Because the root is so it's almost like it's almost like the fruit trees become too fiery and they lose that ability to really firmly root with the soil and they're too cosmic. So we graft a really good fruit varietal onto a plant with a really strong root base to keep it grounded, to keep it rooted. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I do that myself in the sense of like the days when I'm working the soil early in the year, when I'm just turning the soil and stuff, or when I'm cultivating and stuff. Yeah, like I like to do those on the earth days because it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, let me just, or when I'm adding compost, you know, let me just, right, focus on the earth because it's so foundational, it's so fundamental.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And what crops are connected to the earth element?
So all of your, you know, potatoes, radishes, all of your root crops, um, you know, garlic, for instance, even though garlic is like spicy and fiery, it's a root crop, you know, and so it becomes interesting to think about like the different mixtures. Like, does garlic have some fire in there somewhere? Is that where we get the spiciness or whatever? Um, you know, valerian, most people actually think about valerian as a root because a lot, you know, people typically take valerian root for like insomnia or if you want to calm the nerves or whatever, but we actually use the flowers in the preps. And so but if you were growing valerian for the root, um, one of the interesting things I have, and I don't know if it's like seeds from the compost I was using, but I have a lot of yellow dock in my garden this year. And it's like, I don't know how it got in there, but that's actually it's a root that I used to wildcraft a lot. I used to wildcraft for like homeopathy shops where I would go out and like pick the wild stuff for them to use. Um, and so it's not just roots that you cultivate. It would be like chicory root, for instance. If you're wildcrafting roots, if you use chicory roots really like in like sort of cunning folk magical practices. It's supposed to be protective, but it's also good. Like you can roast it and mix with your coffee to make your coffee go farther and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it would
And
be
I was
yeah.
going to say dandelion root is also great.
Dandelion. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah. What about mushrooms? Where do they fall?
That's wow. The mycelium part would definitely be root, right? Because
Mhm,
it's and what's really fascinating about mushrooms is that they're almost like the air of the earth
mhm.
because they're connecting, they're communicating, and that's how trees like communicate with one another and stuff. So it's almost like the air of the earth if you want to start thinking about combinations of elements or something. But that part of it, it's interesting you ask about mushrooms because I was down on the New River Trail the other day. But I was saying hey to my wife. I was like, hey, can we stop at this one place because there's this tree that where I know the reishi mushrooms grow. So that part of the reishi that's like, this is interesting because reishi don't grow from the soil, they grow from the tree. But that part that's in the tree that's hidden, that would still be like earth. It would still be like relate to the root. Whereas the mushroom, the fruiting body itself, they literally call it a fruiting body. That would be, in the case of reishi, they're so beautiful orange and yellow and then white. I think they're kind of fiery, so fruiting body, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting, we get chanterelles around here too that come up later, and they literally come up, I think, when it's like Leo time, and they're like bright orange and stuff. So I could see the argument for like fruiting body, it's fire, but I can also see the argument for like it's like that hidden network in the earth.
Well, and this is a good opportunity to connect the elements, like I call them sister elements, so fire and air and earth and water.
Yes.
So, can you
Yeah.
talk about that and
Yeah.
their relationships and how they connect?
Absolutely. Yeah. So earth and water are a natural pair because earth provides the boundaries for water. Water has no shape of its own. Water will take the shape of whatever container it encounters, and that container is usually the earth. Right? And so, but Earth can get parched and dry and sterile without the water. So Earth and water are both feminine. They're both downward tending elements. They both tend to sink. So they're very compatible. So let's say you were planting a root crop, for instance, and you just couldn't manage a root day, go for the water day next because it's the companion element, and vice versa. If you were planting I mean, Natalie already said she'd plant anything on an earth day, but especially the leaf crops because it's like that companion to the earth element. And then the same way with air and fire are both upward tending cosmic elements. And so if you can't get a fire day, um,
Mm.
then you can go with an air day or vice versa, because they have a natural compatibility.
Mhm. And how about we move into the next element, Gary? You're talking about water. You want to move
Okay.
water or air? You pick.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with water. So yeah. So water. I mean, it's the same thing with water is true with Earth. We were talking about like the all the cool stuff about Earth is found below the surface. It's kind of the same with water. I mean, water looks really boring, like just on the surface. Well, not boring. I mean, the right time of day, you get these beautiful reflections on the water, right? It's really gorgeous, but it looks kind of uniform on the surface at any rate. But then if you put your snorkel glasses down, there's all kinds of fish and stuff going on, right? So it's like it's this feminine element where it tends to go down and in, and so there's this wonderful hidden mystical quality to water that, and it's similar to your soil. You need to test your water to find out, what are the hidden mineral components and whatever that's going on in there. um, Typically you don't want your well, downstream from where your livestock is, for instance, because of bacteria and so that stuff like that. Um, and so that sense of water being a downward tending element and understanding like um, that the water carries things with it as it flows. And so, you know, um, teaching people like there's always signs about you're entering this watershed, right? Because it's like what you do to this place affects like hundreds of miles of watershed, you know, and like understanding. And that's so water has this like sort of universal quality too, because it flows. You know, I remember when I was living in Asheville and finding out like the river, the French Broad River that flows through there, it goes all the way down to Tennessee into Muscle Shoals, Alabama. You know, that is like the same river, you know, and it's, yeah, it's wild to think about how water connects. It's kind of like the mushrooms, how they connect things in the soil. The water connects as well. And so, and if you think about the plant, the leaf is kind of like the part of the plant that connects the root with the flower and the fruit, you know, and it's where all of the nourishment, all the photosynthesis takes place. So it's literally where like the cosmic energy is coming in as well.
Hmm. And what qualities, what energetic qualities does water evoke for our plants?
So water is let's see if I'm remembering right. It's like disease resistance, is that right? I'm saying that right? Let's see if I've got that right. Yeah, resistance. So so form, I think when we talk about form, it's like keeping its shape, having a good if something is dried out, it's going to shrink, it's going to shrivel. But if it's moist, it's going to be full and like holding its shape, right? So
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
form, but then there's also resistance. Um, the thing about water is like too much of it can lead to disease and stuff like that. So we have to be careful about managing. Like we don't want things to be too wet, but we can't have them too dry either.
Yeah, that's so true. Just recently, I was away at my kid's graduation, and my beloved was watering the plants in the greenhouse, and he said, "How much water?" Because it's not really his shtick. And I said, honestly, in the greenhouse, it's really hard to overwater because he was worried about overwatering them, and it's quite hot here typically in and they got overwatered, but it
oh
was
my
only because
goodness.
it was so cold. Like we're having June
Ah,
water
yeah,
here as well,
yeah,
Gary. It is
yeah,
so cold, so we can
yeah,
water and not have to water for 3 days.
yeah,
So that
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So there
it's
you
really
go.
important
Like
to pay
with that
attention.
lack of fire, you can actually overwater. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Right, but yeah, that's funny.
yeah,
Of course, the
yeah.
one time you're like, ah, just let them have it. You're right.
Yeah, and they weren't so bad, just a little bit of yellow on some of them, but yeah, too much water. It's not a good thing either. So, so with what crops are connected and related to the water
So,
element?
all of your leafy greens, your salad crops, your herbal crops, the usually the part that we're using from the herbs is your leafy green stuff. And um, there's an interesting, so typically what we want to do is we want to set up a rhythm of working with the crop on the days when the moon is in the water signs, right? Um, but there's an interesting exception with water in that we don't want to harvest when the moon's in water signs because that will tend to lead to rot. Like if something's too moist, like so if we're harvesting herbs, we want to harvest them on the fire or the air day. Like today, the moon's in is it in Leo today? I think it's the 11th. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're moving into Leo today. So I've got literally dry herbs on my day planner because it's a fire sign, so it's a good day to like cut the herbs to dry them, even
that makes
though
sense. And
yeah,
they say some people say that fire days are great days for weeding as well because their weeds die faster
right.
when you pull them
Yeah,
out, they dry out
cutting
faster.
your grass if you actually don't want to cut the grass and you don't want to have to mow it as often. I try to cut my grass on a fire day when I can because it's like, I mean, you do want to be careful if you live in a place where it can get scorched.
Mm.
You want to be careful with that. But um, early in the year when it's just like going crazy and you're like mowing like twice a week or something, yeah, you can do that sort of thing with weeding or mowing, right?
Yeah. And the what are they called? The zodiacs that are connected to the water
Oh,
signs.
sorry. Cancer is your cardinal water sign. Scorpio is fixed water, and Pisces is the mutable water. So these are the three, and they'll be the blue ones in the calendar.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. We recently had the planet Neptune moved into Pisces, moved in front of Pisces. And so one of the things that I was talking about when I was at JPI a couple years back, people were talking about climate change. And I was like, well, the thing that I find difficult with that whole conversation is like, how do we know which part of it has to do with like human activity and
Mhm.
which part of it has to do with cycles? Because I did research and I was like, you know what? When the planets are in the right constellations, like that, and I said in that article, we might find that California has the opposite problem pretty soon when Neptune goes into, and sure enough, they went from having like this extreme drought, and now their reservoirs are so full they're having to like release water so that they can make sure they have room to fill up again. It's like
Mhm.
um and so yeah, like that idea of the and it's because this is especially true because Neptune is a water planet. So when you have a planet that is watery in nature and it's in front of a water constellation, it's like that water is doubled. It's like the
Mhm.
effect of the water is doubled. And so when we get situations, for instance, where you have like all year long and for several years now, we'll have Neptune in front of Pisces. And so when we get the moon, who is also watery in nature, to go in front of a water constellation, there's like double the chance that we'll get that wet weather because there's more than one planet that's interacting with that, and especially like if they're going to be making a trine at some point in there because the nature of the elements is that they make these trines to one another.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
so yeah, that's one of the interesting things that's going on with the forecasting right now is we have Pluto left a fire. Pluto is a fiery planet, and it left a fire constellation of Sagittarius and moved into Earth. So there's this exit of extra fire energy, and there's this entrance of more water energy. So that's the other reason I think that has to do with like relatively cooler temperatures as well, because
Mhm.
less fire, water is cooler than fire. Water literally will put out fire, you know?
Yeah, it's so
So,
fascinating when we zoom out and look at all the different pieces that are so profoundly connected
yeah.
that we are a part of.
Yep. Yeah. And it's it's fascinating for me to see like this year when we're working on the 2025 calendar. I mean, I think there was literally a month somewhere in there where there was like nothing in the fire element, like nothing, not a single. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been working on the calendar for quite a while and I'd never seen that before. It's like,
Wow.
what is that going to be about? It's like,
Wow. I haven't gone, Leslie's been reviewing the calendar. I have not seen that yet. So there's actually no fire element in
yeah,
the
yeah. Wait
entire
until you
month.
see my forecast. I'm like, literally, I use the word unprecedented because I don't know what that is. Never seen it before.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
using this calendar for years and the Stella Natura as well. And I have never seen a not like I've always seen every element in the
What do
month.
they call it in mathematics? Null set. It's a null set, right?
That's amazing.
Nothing. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So it makes you wonder, like, how will that manifest? Will it be
Mm,
like really cold? Um, especially after having like a super abundance of fire for a
hmm
while, like there were
hmm
literally fires and wildfires everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like you go from like having this abundance to like this scarcity. If there's one to have a scarcity of, I don't know, guess it depends on if you're a fruit farmer. Probably not crazy about having no planets in fire. Like, what day do I plant on?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know?
Let's move into the air element and then we'll move into
Right.
questions, Gary.
I
Okay,
do want to
sounds good.
comment. It's November,
It's
November
November, okay.
2025.
Thank you.
Oh,
So we'll have to
excellent.
look
Wow,
at
she's looking ahead. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. You doing some forecasting yourself there?
I have been living with the calendar
Oh, got
recently,
it.
Gary. You know.
Yes, yes. Got it. Got it. Okay, yeah. You are on top of it too, lady. You're like calling me out on my silly mathematical, like, Gary, there's 31 days in July, right? I'm like, yes, yes, ma'am, there's 30.
Well, we call that proofreading, right? So
Yeah,
your
yeah.
calculations
I'm
are
like,
spot on
oh,
and fabulous.
yeah. Which month is it?
Yeah, well, there's so many moving parts in this calendar, and that's what makes it so powerful, is it's not just the elements, but there's the influential forces, there's the key aspects, and there's the
Aspects,
ascending and
yeah.
descending moon, and there's so many different parts. So to have you go in and do the main calculations, and then for us to go in and proof everything is really powerful. And let's go
So
back to the air element, though. I
air,
think that's the
yes.
last one, right? Air element. So tell us what
Air is really
quality.
interesting because you can literally see alchemy happening in air, like in the morning when there's dew, like especially here in the New River Valley. I mean, just this morning there was like this tremendous fog, and it's like really, and then as the fog begins to evaporate, like it's literally it's becoming fire. The air, right? It's warming up from the fiery sun is warming it up and dispersing the water, and the water vapor disperses. And conversely, in the evening, you can see the dew begin to settle, and so you can literally see the alchemy and that dew, the water from the dew, the alchemists say like that's the stuff that. And so here I've literally got like water catchment to like. And so, and what I've noticed is that even on days like there's literally no rain, but the fog is so dense, like I'll have this much water in my water tubs from the just from the fog condensing on the roof and then draining into, like, wow, that it's really cool, Um, but
Mm,
yeah, so water is like an intermediary element if you think about it, and that's the flower is kind of intermediary between the leaf and the fruit. The flower is kind of like um, a leaf becoming a fruit, if you will. Now, of course, there are certain crops where the flower is the end product. I've got yarrow growing here on my front walk or whatever. The flower is the deal, and so it's not necessarily becoming fruit in that case, unless, of course, we want to get seed, in which case the seed is the fruit. But so if you're working with like cut flowers, if you have a business with cut flowers or whatever, the air is and the airy planets are Venus and Jupiter, which are also known as the benefic planets. And so it's interesting because like one of the things, like when you're pruning fruit trees, one of the reasons for pruning fruit trees is you want to get air circulating through the canopy so that you don't get like rot and fungus and different stuff like that. And so um, air is like really vital to the health of your farm in ways that may not be super obvious, like aerating the soil, you know, and stuff like that, because it allows literally like the soil to breathe, or the
mhm.
tree canopy to breathe, and for things to move, just like the water. You can see the water vapor moving through the air and condensing or rarefying. Air has that quality of like movement to it.
The
A
breath of
fresh,
life,
a
right?
fresh
Air.
breeze, that just feels so good on a hot day. Or yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And the zodiacs that are connected to the air element
Right.
are
So cardinal air is Libra, and fixed air is Aquarius, and then mutable air is Gemini. the twins. And an interesting thing about those is that Libra is sort of, as a constellation, it sort of sits on its side. So it's skinny in terms of like the ecliptic degrees that it covers. And the same thing with the twins. They're like, it's like a tall, skinny constellation. And so when you're looking at the yellow bars on the color coded part of the calendar, you'll see there's literally less yellow in there. And it's literally because they're just smaller. They cover less of the, and so that's an interesting thing. I don't know exactly what I would make of that per se, but maybe a little goes a long way, I guess, with
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the breath is powerful, right? It's so profound because it is a little breath is what gives us life.
Right. And we don't even think about it. We don't even think that we're breathing. We just do it.
Yeah, yeah. So, just I want to bring us back to the earth element because I don't think we touched on the zodiacs for the earth element.
Right. So cardinal Earth is Capricorn, fixed Earth is Taurus, and mutable Earth is Virgo. And
And
these,
what, go ahead.
in particular, Virgo is the opposite of the scales kind of sit sideways and kind of tall and narrow. Virgo is laying on her side. So she's like huge. So the Virgo section, you'll see like if you look on the calendar in the middle of the month, like Leo is really huge because Leo's like long this way. And so you see these big, enormous red bars and then these enormous green bars, like that's Leo and Virgo. And so you get kind of the opposite situation from the air with the, and so you have a lot of opportunity there for your root crop and for cultivating
Hmm.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and what does that mean to be cardinal and fixed?
Right. So cardinal signs are signs that begin a new quarter, right? So Capricorn begins the winter quarter of the year. So it's cardinal in the sense that it has the power of beginnings. Fixed Taurus is the middle of the spring quarter. So the fixed constellations have this quality of being in the middle. They fix, and so fixed Earth, Taurus, fixed Earth is like the earthiest of the Earth signs, and then mutable ones are at the end of a quarter. So they kind of merge into the next quarter. So they have this mutable quality of like, in September, how the weather can be like either hot or cool, depending on, it can change from summer like to fall like. The mutable ones are like that. They have like a kind of a double quality.
Mhm. And so, Gary, we've spent a lot of time talking about the elements and the elemental alchemy. And can you just bring us back to how it connects to Rudolph Steiner and his teachings and Maria Thun and her research?
Right. So one of the things that I think is really interesting, Steiner talks a lot about these cosmic forces versus these earthly forces, and that's very hermetic, by the way. Hermeticism, talk about the above and the below, like literally in the Emerald Tablet, it says as above, so below. That's what they're talking about, cosmic and earthly. That's Steiner just used different terms for the same thing. So with the air and fire, these upward pointing triangles, we have these outward radiating forces that seek to connect with, the upper limits, right? And then we have with water and earth, we have these downward, inward that seek towards the center. So there's like this grounding, solid, stabilizing force, and there's this force that allows us to reach out and to participate in the wider cosmic um, dance, and so figuring out like the sort of rhythm of that, and so we talked about earlier, like we can watch how the moon is going up through the zodiac and certain part, and we can watch how the moon is going down, You know, we can talk about the sun, the days, as the days are getting longer during this part of the year. And then what's interesting about that is like the first day of summer, the solstice, that's when the sun actually starts to get, the days start to get shorter from there. And so the sun during the spring quarter is like the days are constantly getting longer. And like your hay, like if you farm hay, you know, you want to cut your hay before that it seeds out and becomes like, you know, less vital. You want to
Hmm.
catch it while it's nice and green, and while that energy, it's the same idea like when you're cutting herbs, you know, you want to get them like in the morning when that energy, the daily energy of the sun is still moving up. So
Right.
but then when you want to hang them upside down to dry them, to keep the essential oils and stuff from escaping, from just right. So there's this interplay between these upward moving forces, and knowing when to time yourself with those. So you're gonna cut your hay when it's still um budding out. You want to cut your herbs in the morning, right? But then you want to dry them, right, with the downward um energy by hanging them and so forth. So it's
Mhm.
like the
Mhm.
alchemy is in understanding the rhythm and the interplay between those two things. Are we
Mhm.
making plants out of dirt, or are we making plants into dirt?
So a cool little experiment you can actually do too is bricks isn't necessarily testing the nutritional density of the um of the crops that you're growing, but it is testing the sugar level, which is can be reflective um in how your plant is doing. And so this
Hmm.
is a little unit that you can use to do a bricks test on your
Wow.
hay or your crops, for example. And
Interesting.
that is you can actually see the difference on the different days. So do your own do your own experimenting and notice, like, is the bricks higher on an INQ day, which is an increased nutritional quality day, and
Right.
those are in the calendar. So some of these calculations that Gary is talking about for increased nutrition quality or yields or disease resistance, they're not calculations that you have to necessarily do if you have the calendar. They're already in the calendar
Right.
and defined for you. So they'll help you. And I just love experimenting to see
Right.
what is real and what's not real. So that is always really curious, because even people who have had really successful gardening and farming careers who start to use the calendar, they're like, my stuff has always been good, but I have noticed that my plants are stronger and healthier when I'm following the rhythm of the moon
Right.
and
I
the
mean, if
Mayan
you got a
calendar.
green thumb, you could probably do whatever you want and get by with it. But if you do that extra bit, you might do even better, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And the other
So,
thing is, like, because each biosystem is unique, your farm might respond a little bit differently than someone else's. And so doing that testing will also not just what's real, but what's real for you and for your local ecosystem, right? Yeah.
so true. So, Gary, can you tell us? There's a really good question here. Can you explain the difference between the calendar calculations and the actual moon sign and element?
Okay, so signs are different than constellations. Signs are based purely on the seasons. And and it's like an equal 30-degree division. So on the day that the sun crosses the equator heading north, the sign of Aries begins. And then we'll literally calculate 30 degrees, and that's where the sign of Taurus begins, and then calculate 30 degrees, and that's where the sign of Gemini begins. Okay, so it's all based on like the movement of the sun in beginning a new season, crossing either an equinox or a solstice, and then dividing equally by 30 degrees. That's what signs are. We're not using the signs in the calendar. Um, the idea with the calendar is that we're looking at like the actual light of the moon, and like that's going to be hitting your plants, the actual moonlight that's going to be shining on your plants. Where is it coming from? What part of the sky is it coming from? And those are the constellations. And so those are, in this era, at this point in time, those are offset by roughly 24 degrees is the rough offset of the constellations to the, but that's just rough because the constellations are not 30 degrees equal. They're, as we talked about, Libra is tilted on its side, so it's kind of skinny. Virgo's sitting on her other side, and so she's really wide. And so, you know, it depends on which constellation we're talking about regarding the offset. But they are different things. And so I hope that answers your question. We're looking at the actual light that the moon is going to be shining onto, and like, and the constellation as sort of this cosmic energy that the moon is relaying down to the plants. And by tuning the plants to that, by setting up a rhythm and saying, okay, and listen, I talk to my plant. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'll be literally, hello, lovelies. Today's a wonderful Earth Day, so I'm going to be tending to your roots and cultivating and aerating the soil and whatever. And then as we set up a rhythm, when the moon is shining through those constellations, what we're doing is literally what I was talking about earlier. So the plants are not simply nourished with the minerals and with the stuff from the air. They're literally getting that cosmic nourishment from the stars and from the cosmos, and they're being basically educated to nourish themselves with that as well. You see, that's what we're doing. And so we're giving them an education in one way, and we're giving them a source of nourishment that other farmers just don't have access to. And that's sort of the hidden secret sauce.
And one of the other questions that comes up a lot is some of the calculations that people notice in the calendar who really study astrology notice that they're not succinct. So we'll say something is in Sagittarius and they're like, and no, it's not in Sagittarius, it's in something else. So can you speak to the calculations that we use in that perspective?
Right. So as I said before, if you're looking at, so for instance, like me personally, I was born April 10th, 1968. So if I look up my sign in Mayan astrology, I'm a Jaguar, right? If I look up my sign in the Chinese zodiac, I'm a monkey. If I look up my sign in the Hindu Jyotish zodiac, I'm a Pisces. If I look up my sign in the Greek tropical, I'm an Aries, right? If I look up my sign in the Maria Thun constellation zodiac, I'm also a Pisces. It would be closer to the Hindu Jyotish system, actually. But the Hindu Jyotish system is still equal signs of 30 degrees. So it's not the same. It's just closer to that. But ultimately, yeah, of course, you know, to say it's not one or it's not, well, yeah, if you're using a different system, of course, you're going to get different results. It's that simple. But this system, to me, I'm guessing the reason, and I don't know that I've ever seen it explicitly stated why she chose to use the constellations, but I'm guessing, like, if we're talking about plants, right, the sun shines on the plants and makes them alive. The moon shines on them too. And so we're literally talking about the light that shines through them. That's coming from the constellations. And so it makes sense to use the constellations in that context, right? It's just light-based energy.
So we're using the actual constellations.
Yeah. Yeah, the actual stars, the literal stars. And like, so go out in the morning, for instance. I was out this morning, I got a photograph of it, and take a look in the east. It's about an hour before dawn, looking east. You'll see there's three stars that form like a little that's Aries. And right below that, you'll see this other brighter star. That's Mars. Mars just recently went into Aries. So I defy you to tell me Mars is not in Aries, because I can point to it and say there's Aries and there's Mars. Whereas like in the other system, I think Mars is in Taurus, but show me Mars in Taurus.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, if I don't mean to be belligerent, but if you actually want to get into an argument about which is correct, like I can show you mine. You
Yeah,
know what I'm
right. And I don't
saying?
think it's so much as being right and wrong because there's like that's like oh that
No, no,
it's
not
more
at all.
like it's more the like where is that understanding? Because a lot of people, especially in North America, lean into astrology and
Yeah,
the sidereal and
the tropical zodiac. Yeah,
tropical
yeah.
zodiac. So, and that's a little bit different than what they're finding in
It's
the
yeah,
calendar.
it's a
That they're like, what? And so
yeah.
that is a
But I'm
really
just saying, like, if you want to get into an argument saying Mars is not in there, say, well, it kind of is. Like, I can
yeah,
actually point to it, you know,
yes,
like, I mean, you know, and you can
yeah,
literally see like the stars of Pisces are right here, and it's just past those, and the stars of Aries are here. Like, you can see it's like right there at that border, you
yeah.
know? Um, and so, yeah, that's what we're going for, is like the light of the cosmos, and the moon acting as almost like a prism for that light.
Mhm.
She's sort of magnifying that light and bringing it to the plants. And
Mhm.
as we work with the calendar, we're training, and or you might even think of it as educating the plants to take in that cosmic nourishment in addition to the earthy nourishment that they're, you know, made to do. But we
Yeah,
have to train them or educate them to get that cosmic nourishment. Otherwise, they're kind of like just, for lack of a better term, dumb plants. They don't, right? They're not
you're right. Well, they're innately intuitive, and
right.
we're also it's very earthly. They're innately intuitive, earthly, and then there's
Yeah.
that cosmic astral.
And so if we just set up that rhythm, they will just naturally tune into that, and you know, and that will, and because it's so basic and fundamental, like elemental, you know,
Mm,
energies, they will respond like just, you know, and they'll show you when you're doing it right. You know, they'll show you when you're doing what they need.
right. And tell, can you speak to how our own personal zodiac signs, our elemental zodiac signs connect with the elemental alchemy of the calendar, the planting calendar?
Right. So, again, if you're talking about like again me being born April 10th, you know, like the tropical zodiac, I'm in Aries, right? But constellation and or like Hindu zodiac, I'm a Pisces. Um, right? So, like you have to do that correction first of all. Like, so, but if you think about it for a second, like, are we talking about me as like a personality, like me as in like Gary P. Caton, the guy with the bio in there, has been here, done that, and has these qualifications to do this job, right? Like that's Gary P. Caton, the personality, right? That guy's an Aries. Yeah, he definitely is. Okay. But if we're talking about Gary P. Caton as like a spiritual being, who is like, you know, in tune with the cosmic forces, that guy's a Pisces. That guy's a mystic. That guy likes to go out and be in nature. That guy can be alone in on his farm for days, even weeks, without talking to nobody. He's cosmic to the bone. He's like, he just wants to be in unity with all. You know, that's very Piscean. So yeah, you don't have to get stuck in like one way or the other. Like they're literally both can totally be true. But yeah, like just be aware that they're different systems. And so the one that you're used to identifying with, um, that comes from a different system. So it may not directly translate. If you wanted to know, um, you know, which one you would resonate more with the planting calendar, just look in the table that's at the bottom of the page, find your birthday. So let's say people who are born today, June 11th, right? We'll look at the table at the bottom of page 22 on this year's calendar. from the 1st through the 20th, the sun's in Taurus. Sun's in front of Taurus. Okay. So in this system, you're a Taurus,
Mm-hmm.
Geminis. Deal with that. And, it might be fun to think about, like, how that, again, like I can totally identify as a Pisces,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm like, um, doing my more spiritual side of things. But, so I think one can be true like on a personality level, whereas, and that's something that is uniquely human too, right? It's uniquely like, human to have an ego and a personality and all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plants have personalities in the sense that they have a unique characteristic, and one tree is definitely different from another tree, but they don't have egos in the sense that they don't need to have a bio, like you don't have a little tag with a bio of your tree. You know what I'm saying? People have bios. I hope I'm making sense, like the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
one
you
is
are.
more, yeah,
And what
one is
about,
more, yeah,
yeah, and
okay.
say, what about like if I'm like when I'm working, like I'm a water sign, so when I'm working with like a fruit tree or planting on a fruit day or planting on an earth day, like I'm just curious what your insights might be around the elemental alchemy of our personal signs and working with the elements on our farms and in our gardens and
Right.
with the plants that we grow.
Yeah. Oh, so are you indeed a water sign or
Aquarius.
water Aquarius? Oh, water bearer.
Yeah,
That's actually air
your
constellation.
sign. Yeah.
Okay. When's your birthday?
January 29th.
January 29th. Okay. So in this system, if we look on January 29th, yeah, see in this system, from the 19th through the 31st of January, the sun is in front of Capricorn. So that's what I'm saying. Like, and honestly, Natalie, I mean, you're totally Capricorn. You're the most organized person. You're
Mhm.
so much more organized than I am. Like, I'm the
Leslie.
scatterbrained Pisces. You're total Capricorn.
That's funny. That's Leslie. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, you don't think so?
Oh, I can be, but Leslie really is an organized
She's
one
the,
of
okay, she's the
she-
organized one.
I thrive in organization though. I thrive in routine and
Okay,
organization.
so see,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like that brings out, right? Whereas some people like routine, they're like, oh God, I feel like I'm dying because it's the same. And so
Yeah.
understanding that, like, so your example of water person with fruit with fiery type, your natural tendency is like really moist, whereas the nature of the crop that you're working with is really hot and dry, and they need, like I said, fruit trees actually need that air in the canopy to keep from being too wet,
Mm.
particularly in foggy areas like where I'm
Mm.
at.
Man, that just blew my mind because I love that exercise of noticing the sign that we are and what element we fall into, and then putting on different lenses and
Yeah, it's
how
just like that. It's a different lens. Yeah.
how the plants might be experiencing the
Yeah.
elements. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, really
absolutely.
powerful.
Because, like I said, as a Pisces, I tend to be like, I start out with a plan, but like the plan, if we get from the beginning of the year to the end of the year and the plan hasn't changed, somebody else is running the show, not me. It's a mutable, right? Like and so like I have to remember, like, consistency with, especially with certain crops, like being consistent is really important, and to show up as sort of an act of devotion. Like I need to actually be contrary to my own nature for their sake, in certain ways. And so just kind of like, yeah, tuning in and yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about the moment that you knew there was something to this, that you knew there was something to this elemental connection and elemental alchemy in your
What
farming and gardening.
mm, yeah. So I got invited. Catherine and Rosemary invited me because of an article that I had published in another publication where I was literally showing like the planets and the constellations, like what I said about Mars. Like, go out and look at Mars. He's right underneath the stars of Aries. Um, so I had published something about that, and they say they saw that and they asked me to do it. And they asked me the question, can you do this? And like I had already been an astrologer for like 20 years or something. So the can I do it? No, yeah, absolutely, I can do it. But the yeah, like the really, it was when I was reading the Steiner and not just Steiner, but like the Schmidt et al., the seed regeneration. These people are really classically educated people like Steiner, of course, but Maria's genius was she took, something so basic like the elements, which again, like these come from the pre-Socratic philosophers with fancy names like Anaximenes and Heraclitus and these cats. Like she's pulling that stuff in and applying it to gardening. I was just really blown away at how elegant it was, and then but it was with the weather. It was with the weather where I was like, okay, like there's clearly something going on, because like as soon as I started working with it, I started noticing like, oh yeah, there's, it's like the moon goes in front of a earth constellation and bam, it gets cold. It's like, wow, okay, I'm paying attention. um yeah, and like I said, I mean, Maria says as much in her books that she was following the weather as well as what the plants were telling her. So, yeah, that for me was the moment where I was like, okay, I know something's going on here, because you can't argue with the fact that it's cold or it's raining, like it just is.
Yeah, so true. And what inspires you most about elemental alchemy?
What inspires me again is like the idea that we are co-creators, you know, that we have the ability um to sort of um do this creative act of like turning the plant material into soil and then turning the soil into plants. And we have this ability to like make sure that our cosmos, our farm, right, which is our cosmos, our sort of microcosm, if you will, our cosmos is as complete as it can be. We can balance the where it's deficient with different things, literally like, I was reading on the JPI Substack today. They were talking about how like certain animals' manure will be better for certain plants than other plants, because of the planet that that animal relates to might relate to the planet of this plant, and so we can literally like by having the right animals combined with the right plants, we can literally like balance out. We're creating our own cosmos
Mhm,
basically. It's a
mhm.
so in other words, farming becomes an art,
Yeah,
becomes a creative art. That's just, and it's like farmers as artists. I mean, how cool is that? I love it.
true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. Lone says, I suppose your calendar gives the same information as Mary Toon, or no? Yes. You're talking about the Maria Thun calendar, I'm guessing, right, Lone? It does. And we also like what makes the celestial planting calendar unique is that it has the elemental research and calculations that the Maria Thun does. And then we also go into the biodynamic preparations and the sequential sprays, which is based on Hugh Courtney's work. And so the best times to apply BD 500, BD 501, the sequential sprays to bring in moisture and to
To spread it out, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. And then we also have the influential forces, which is increased germination rates, increased nutrition density, increased yields, and increased disease resistance. So, and then we also have the ascending, descending moon. and the moon phases, the zodiac. So,
The color
and
coding, I
also
think, is unique to the celestial calendar too, isn't it? The color
it
coding.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then also Gary's celestial events in
Yeah, you won't get my forecast
Newport.
anywhere else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it is similar, and it's a little bit different as well. So similar in terms of her research, and our like our calculations are based on her research. Yeah.
Absolutely,
And then we just
100%.
go
Yeah.
deeper with George Schmidt's research and Hugh Courtney's um, research as
Steiner,
well.
for sure. Yeah.
And Steiner, yeah. Oh, and if you have not got your calendar yet and you'd like one, you can pick up the digital version for just $11, or you can get the physical one mailed to you for $20. And there's still lots of the year left in there for it to help you with harvesting and transplanting and all the good things. So $20 and gets it right to your door in North America. And Gary, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
your
you so
time
much.
today.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Had
sharing your
fun.
heart and your wisdom,
You bet.
and for all the work you do to make the Celestial Planting Calendar come to life. And
I'm
thank you for
grateful
sharing.
for the work. I love
Uh,
it.
well, we're grateful for you.
Yeah. I am at Dream, DREAM, like what you do at night, dreamastrologer.com.
Dreamastrologer.com, on Facebook, Dream Astrologer, and on Instagram, Sky Astrologer.
Right. Yeah. All the links to my socials are on the homepage as well, so you can go link through there. Yeah.